Hi, I'm Garret Biss. One topic that comes up a lot and is discussed a lot around this topic of addiction is stigma. A lot of people talk about how the stigma perpetuates the addiction and it creates a lot of pain and suffering. I'm one of the few people that actually argue that the stigma around addiction can actually serve people that are facing addiction or living in addiction recovery if it's looked at the right way and if we understand it the right way. But to have that conversation, we really need to understand what the stigma is, where it comes from, and how it spreads, and what are the consequences that it creates. So stigma is really a manifestation of fear. In an idea that or scarcity mindset, this idea that there's only so much resource to go around. Maybe it's natural resource, maybe it's job opportunity, maybe it's love, maybe it's things for our health. If you have this mind that there's only so much to go around and that you need to fight for and protect those resources that you need for your survival, this is an idea that creates a lot of fear. The fear is that if I don't get those things that I need, then I'm not going to have the happiness, the fulfillment, the health, the life, the longevity that I need if I don't get my access to those resources. So one way that we deal with this and one way that this manifests in our behavior is through judgment. And fear and judgment is really how the stigma grows, where it comes from and how it manifests. So the stigma comes from that fear, and then it manifests through judgment. That judgment is anytime that we look at another person and anybody that's different than us, and we place ourselves on a different footing or hold ourselves to a different level. We judge other people when we think that we are better than them in some way. We might judge a person for their political preference. We might judge a person for some ideology, some philosophy, some belief, some lifestyle. Whenever we're judging another person, we're saying that we're better than them or more correct than them, and therefore putting us on in kind of a better place to receive those resources that we need for our survival and for our happiness. So what's this have to do with stigma? The stigma, it really perpetuates because when we fear that there's not enough going around and that we need to judge other people and kind of protect those people that are most like us, protect our family, our tribe, we fear that some label is going to be applied to us that will affect our ability to, maybe perform at work or get the promotions at work, our ability to connect with and maintain friendships, or our ability to, be respected in society, the social capital that we have in our society. We're so afraid about addiction. It has such a bad reputation because of the misunderstanding of addiction and what it is and how it manifests, that people are so afraid to have that label associated with them that the whole topic of addiction and recovery becomes taboo and nobody wants to talk about it because of this fear that somehow they're going to be associated with it and it's going to have some kind of negative consequence. So a lot of that fear comes from this misunderstanding that there's certain, truths or absolutes about addicts, that they're somehow, permanent defects, or that they're always, behave or act in a certain way, and there's only all the stereotypes that are associated with addiction. So these are all bad things because that judgment is the opposite of connection. Well, connection brings people together. Judgment is what tears that connection apart and prevents us from having those nurturing relationships and that connection that we need with other people, and that's vital for our survival. And because of that lack of connection, or because that severing of a connection, that creates a lot of extra pain and suffering in those people that are struggling, and creates pain in people that weren't struggling before because now they no longer have that connection that they need. So these are all the many negative things that come from stigma, really where stigma comes from and how it perpetuates and manifests. But we don't often look at the benefits that can come from stigma. And I'm one of the few people that will discuss and talk about some of the positives that can come from the stigma and from the reality that we face the stigma. So one of the benefits that comes from it is a lot of the motivation or the incentive for people that are facing addiction or living in addiction recovery to not be that stereotype, to do more of the self-work, to live more into their true potential, to overcome some of those challenges so that they aren't wrapped up in all these bad feelings or all these stereotypes that are associated with somebody that's in addiction or addiction recovery. Sometimes that extra adversity, sometimes that extra challenge or incentive to perform more inspires us to put more time and effort into becoming better versions of ourselves and really living into our potential. So if you look at the negative consequences, yes, there are a lot of negatives that come from the stigma. It does create a lot of pain. It does create a lot of suffering that's not necessary, but you can also use it as, in a way to empower yourself, or for others facing addiction to empower themselves to move beyond that shame and that guilt and actually live into and be a representation of their true, beautiful, and perfectly lovable and acceptable self. If you know somebody in addiction recovery, you yourself are living in recovery, and the stigma has been something that's weighing on you and holding you down and feeling that shame and feeling that guilt, I challenge you to do some work with that and work on that and try to find ways that you yourself can use that stigma to help empower you and help fuel you and give you some extra strength to live into a true representation of yourself. One of the things I do is I hold groups of group coaching called Thriving in Your Recovery, and it's a group coaching program that helps me take and guide people through a curriculum to help them identify some of the things that are holding themselves back and really live into their true potential, to cultivate greater positivity, to find greater engagement, overcome some of those obstacles that keep us from engaging in those things that really matter, find and cultivate greater meaning and purpose in their life, and then achieving the goals that they set out and achieving things that are worthwhile in those areas or those things in life that are most important. So I appreciate you checking out this video. Please continue to do anything that you can do to talk about addiction, talk about recovery, and help us move through this stigma so those people that are suffering the most can get the help that they need.